Good evening, everyone. Before we begin, I got to read a disclosure here. This meeting is being recorded. The meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Enosburg Falls is being conducted electronically in order to ensure the safety of all attendees and to maintain compliance with Governor Scott's executive order. Per H 681, signed into law March 30th, 2020, Section 6 is a temporary suspension of designated physical meeting location requirements of Vermont's open meeting law, VSA Section 312A1. In order to ensure that all attendees can hear clearly, your audio may be muted. When you wish to speak, you can raise your hand in the participant list or by submitting a chat request, or if you called in by pressing *9. Once acknowledged by the chair, please clearly state your name and proceed with your question or comment. Please remember that when unmuted, all participants can hear any sounds in your environment. Again, this meeting is being recorded. Okay, so I'll take a roll call of the board members. Jason?
Here.
Cindy?
Here.
Leonard?
Here.
And no Heather tonight yet, but she'll be joining us later, hopefully. So first up on the agenda, is there any modifications or changes? Hearing none, I'll move on to public comment. Is there anyone here from the public that wishes to speak tonight? I see no hands raised, so we'll move on to review and approval for the minutes of the special joint meeting November 24th, 2020, and the regular meeting on November 24th, 2020. Did everyone get a chance to look those over?
Yep.
And if you didn't see any errors or omissions, I'll hear a motion to accept the minutes from both meetings.
A motion to accept the minutes.
Cindy with the first, I have a second.
Second.
Jason with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. All right, it's unanimous. Next up, wastewater facilities engineering inspection and evaluation report with Wayne Elliott from A&E Engineering. Good evening, Wayne.
Wayne, I think you're still muted.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. Wish we were doing this in person, but it's what it is, I guess. Even though I don't miss the drive, but I still wish we were there in person. But anyways, so there's a lot of information here. I'm going to kind of go through this briefly, kind of more of a high level for you guys. Feel free to jump in, I guess, as we go here. There's a lot of detail here, and but I definitely want to just give you guys a quick overview. I do have Merrick Gillies, I think, from my office was going to sign in. Merrick did a lot of the work on this too, so he just kind of wanted to listen in here. Now, you guys have the report in front of you. Do you prefer that Matt?
They do have copies of it, Wayne.
Okay.
I don't know if everybody's got it right in front of them, but
okay.
That board, do you guys have your copies of the report that were put in your cupboards in the office?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good.
If it pleases the board or Wayne or any of the participants, I can also screen share that.
Yeah. Does the board prefer that we screen share it, or what's easier for you?
And Matt, could you do that? I don't have my copy.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. What I'll do, Matt, is I'll make sure kind of to reference the pages as we go here. So why don't you just jump forward to page 1. Okay. Little background, a lot of these treatment plants in Vermont are similar age. So this is a requirement a lot of other facilities are going through at about the same time. Believe it or not, I think I'm on my second round of these. I did these 20 years ago at a lot of these facilities. And what the state's really trying to do is just to make sure, there's a good comprehensive assessment of the entire wastewater facility, not just the treatment plant, but also the collection system and the stream crossings. And what they're trying to do is make sure that the community's really got a plan moving forward, because what they want to do is make sure that, that there's continued reliable operation here for the next 20 years. One thing that I'll just start with Enosburg Falls, I've worked on the plant since the late 80s. And the village, is in really good shape here. It's kind of a report card of the status of the, the infrastructure. And, you know, overall, the village has always been very proactive about taking care of things and maintaining things. And, you know, that's a credit to the operations staff that you have, because these can end in a lot of different forms, as we'll talk about at the end. But, you know, overall, the village is in really good shape considering the age of some of the components. So just a little bit, forgive me for reading this, but I kind of want you to just understand. So this is a requirement of your discharge permit issued by the state. The permit was renewed on August 1st, 2018. So they usually give the community some time to perform this evaluation. But basically, the engineering inspection shall include the following as required: an in-depth inspection of the wastewater treatment facility, pump stations, collection system, and manholes. At the treatment facility, all components which are critical to the treatment process or which could adversely affect effluent quality in the event of failure shall be inspected. Such components, and these are just the ones that you have at your plant: grit removal, comminutors, tank integrity, biological treatment systems, flow metering, critical valves, sludge handling, and then at the pump stations, any bypass or supporting appurtenances shall be inspected. The next one, which is a big one, this is kind of came to head here in a lot of these communities probably about 3 or 4 years ago, is inspecting the collection system river crossings. And the village has, you know, several of those with the Missisquoi River and some of the streams. And then the last part is they want it to be comprised of a visual observation of equipment operability condition, as well as a review of maintenance records to determine recurring equipment problems and to estimate future life. So a big part of this is obviously working closely with the staff, because those are the guys that are operating the plant on a daily basis and, you know, doing the regular maintenance and have a really great handle on, you know, kind of the state of things and where things are at and, you know, what may be needed moving forward. Matt, just kind of quickly, if you want to flip ahead to page 3. So a little bit of history here, which I think is important. The village still has pipes in the ground that date back to the late 1800s. They have the old clay pipes, and those still exist on some of the streets. But beyond that, the majority, the treatment plant and a lot of the sewer lines were put in back in 1977. So we wouldn't consider that all that old by, you know, the state of this type of infrastructure. And then there was a major sewer separation project done in 1995 for the CSO, combined sewer overflows. You know, that included about 10,000 feet of new sewer lines. So again, just to, you know, keep in mind, and some of this, it's amazing, is still incredibly good condition, but you know, some of the pipes in the grounds are, you know, over 120 years old. And Brian, I think the guys are running down to drop some samples, and I have some Mylar drawings in my office that I want to get back to the village, of some of the sketches of these sewer lines that date back. They're pretty interesting, kind of a neat kind of historical document. So we had those in my office, and I want to return those back to the village. River crossings, the village has several of these. And that's obviously with the Missisquoi River running kind of through the collection system and some of the other streams. For pump stations, you have 3 major pump stations. You have the St. Albans pump station, which was built, that's down from St. Albans Street, was built back in 1977, the same time as the wastewater plant. And then if you're going kind of east on 105, you've got in the low point, you've got the Trout Brook ejector station. That was also put in back in 1977. It serves only approximately 3 residential homes. And then when the business park came to be kind of on the easterly part of the village, that infrastructure, this force main and some of the gravity sewers and the pump station were built back in about 2001. That was actually built all with the grant money. The village received an EDA grant. And then there's several, about 6 grinder pump stations, kind of in the southeast corner near the village office. Those are located across on the other side of the river, and it's just they couldn't get gravity flow from that side of the river back across the bridge. So there's 6 of those scattered around that part of the collection system. The treatment facility, actually I'm on page 4, Matt, if you wanted to just scroll down. So the treatment plant, you know, was built in 1977. Really interesting history there that a lot of people don't know about. When that plant was built, It had a permitted capacity of 256,000 gallons per day. And of course, at that time, there was a combined system. So it was a lot of rainwater, extraneous flow entering the plant. Well, they got the plant online and the flows already exceeded the permitted capacity. So they went back to the state, and the state granted an increase in permitted capacity to 450,000 gallons per day, which without any kind of real structural modifications. So this plant is very unique and interesting because it performs very, very well. But generally, things are undersized relative to what we would build this plant to in the current kind of per the current standards. 1997, the chemical phosphorus removal was built. That was the addition out front, and that was paid for with a 100% state grant. Then in 2001, the biological phosphorus removal components were built. That again was a 100% state grant. And then 2011, there was a bunch of pump replacements, chlorine contact tank expansion, and primarily the offline storage tank for the CSOs that's out in the ground in front of the village office. And this is important because you keep in mind, some of the components out the plant, the tanks, even though they're in good shape now, are approaching, approximately 43 years of age. Page 7, please, Matt. So the other thing we do is before we get into kind of looking at the specific equipment and maintenance is we do a very comprehensive review of the operating data. And that's to compare it to the original design criteria, just see how the facility's working. And primarily to make sure, there's consistent compliance with the effluent permit limits. The table here, figure 3.1, is the average monthly flows from January 2018 to December 2019. So you can see the orange line is at that's the permitted flow capacity of 450,000 gallons per day. For that 2-year period, the plant saw about 271,000 gallons per day. That's about 60% of your permitted limit. What's important about that is that once you hit 80% of the 450,000 gallons per day, that's when the community really has to start looking at expansion. So roughly the village has almost 90,000 gallons per day of current hydraulic permitted capacity, which is good news because I don't see you guys using that or needing all of that even over the next 20 years. That's a lot of residential units or a lot of opportunities. So you're in very good shape there moving forward. You can see the peaks, just to talk a little bit about the peaks. And this isn't uncommon. There's still some roof drains tied into the collection system. So if you're looking at the blue line, that's the actual monthly average flow. And you can see the peaks, and basically that's what's happening, so from March, from May, you get the introduction of the snow melt. Those are the wet periods in the spring and the fall. But if you look at the bottom flows, and I think if we looked at that for 2020, the actual dry weather baseline flow this plant sees is really about 150,000 gallons per day. So that between that and the 271,000, that's kind of the influence of the wet weather flow that the plant sees. But again, this isn't uncommon to other facilities. Part of this is the age of the collection system in some parts. And as I mentioned, you do have some roof drains still tied into the sewer system. Let's flip forward, Matt, to page 12, please. So the big change with a lot of these facilities over the last couple of years is there's been a lot of focus on the Lake Champlain, and we call that the TMDL, which really sets new targets for the amount of phosphorus that can be discharged to all of these receiving waters. And there's obviously a lot of attention with the Missisquoi, with the St. Albans Bay area. So basically the village's allocation was reduced to 273 pounds per year. In the state triggers, so that's the orange graph that you can see here for 2018, 2019. That's the actual permit limit, and that's pounds. Those are total pounds over the entire calendar year. The gray line is 218 pounds, and that's again over a year. That's the trigger that once you start to approach that you need to start planning for improvements to better improve the phosphorus removal. The good news is you can see in 2018, you're at 168. 2019, it actually went down at 146. This plant does very well with the phosphorus removal. And the good news here is the village already complies with this without having to implement any kind of significant capital improvements. And that's not uncommon with some of the other communities that are having to make a fairly significant investment to make sure that they can comply with this lower phosphorus limit moving forward. The other thing this plant does very well is it does great at what we call the biological phosphorus removal. And what that means is the plant, in many cases and for extended periods of time, can remove the phosphorus without any chemical addition. And that has a couple major benefits. It reduces the operating cost because you don't have to purchase that chemical. And then it also has the other side benefit of reducing the sludge, the solids that are generated that have to be disposed of, off site some other fashion. Page 17, Matt. Any questions on anything so far, or? Okay. So jumping into section 4 here, we'll start with the sewer collection system. Just to kind of reiterate the ages of everything out there. You've got some stuff that's, dates back to the late 1800s. A lot of it's, 1977 vintage, and then there's a fair amount, about 10,000 feet of gravity sewer that was constructed in 1995. And the village again has been proactive over the years and continues to be moving forward. The village replaced some of the older sewer lines on a couple of the streets this year up on Water Tower Road and Elm Street. So, that's kind of the plan to continue moving forward. And I'm sorry, we're actually looking at Elm Street right now in the study, but the village kind of continues to look at the age of some of these sewer lines moving forward.
Yeah,
The other
it was Orchard Street.
yeah,
right?
that's right, John. Thank you for correcting me. I took a ride through there a couple weeks ago. That came out nice with the paving and everything too. On
Yeah,
my way to Richford. Yep, looks
Thank
good.
you. I thought it
Yep.
came out well too. Thank you.
Yep. The other thing we do as part of this is we inspect manholes, and we had done several of these as part of the CSO work. And then we also did another 13 or so with the village staff. And I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail. There wasn't really a lot of anything significant. There's a table on the next page that kind of summarizes the results. Obviously, some of the old brick structures, are the priority moving forward. And the other ones, again, the village has been good and proactive about, inspecting these and doing the needed work, as it's observed. Stream crossings, page 819, please, Matt. Yep. So you've got about 9 stream crossings. So these were all each individually looked at. And, the concern here obviously is if you had a pipe break, you could have a gravity sewer going under a stream that could be exposed. If you had a pipe break, you'd have a direct discharge, which could lead to, obviously not just the environmental issues, but some kind of maybe fines from the state. And then you could have force mains or things that are suspended on bridges and other things. So again, if there was a leak or break, that could have the same effect. Really important to kind of keep an eye on these on a pretty regular basis. There's 9 of them. Wasn't anything here major of concern here. There was one G2, which, there were some concrete supports, but nothing major here that we identified here of concern. And if you want to look at the next page, just very quickly, if you're interested, there's photos of each of these stream crossings and the different types. Again, some of these just run below the stream. Some of these are suspended on bridges. You can see G2 was the one that was identified with the concern of the support. So that's something that the staff is aware of, and, we'll continue to keep an eye on and watch those moving forward. Let's see. Let's see, page 22, Matt. Yep. So what we do for each of these different components as we come up with a summary, to kind of identify what the major deficiencies or concerns moving forward. And we look at this in kind of 3 different ranges. Anything less than 2 years is really a higher priority. 2 to 5 years, kind of an intermediate, and obviously something else 6 to 10 years is a lower priority. So this just summarizes, what the findings and what the major items were, and this gets folded here towards the end, which we'll talk about, how this stuff gets implemented. Nothing real significant here. Stream crossing G2, those supports, I think they may have already been addressed or scheduled to. We're recommending that the village update the sewer mapping. You do have a map, but there's a lot of focus with, kind of GPS with asset management. It's just not, the structures aren't GPS located. So that's something that would be helpful to have moving forward. And the village already does this, but, they'll continue to video these stream crossings moving forward so they can just, again, keep an eye on them and observe them on a regular basis to identify any issues before they happen. And then we identified 5 manhole structures that, and this is stuff that the village staff can do. It's typically frames and covers, internal sealing, maybe some cleaning. Those are things that you can do out of your sewer budget. Section 5, page 23, a little bit on the pump stations. So you have the 3 major ones, or I'd say, well, Trout Brook is really kind of a minor one. St. Albans was constructed in 1977. That's really the last date of any major work, but there has been replacement of pumps and other things that have been done there, which is good news. Trout Brook, 1977, not really much there that's been done in the last, 40 plus years. Industrial Park, that pump station isn't that old. We typically expect, tanks, structures and buildings, to have 40 to 50 plus year useful life, especially if they've been well maintained. The equipment, pumps, controls, that kind of stuff will have a 25 to 30 year useful life. So those are kind of the triggers that we're looking at, when we're kind of ranking to see what the condition of these different components are. Grinder pump stations were put in back in 77, but the villages, again, has been proactive about replacing those pumps as needed in the controls just out of your sewer, out of your capital budget. What I'll probably do, you can scroll through there, but each pump station, actually, maybe I'll talk about, if you want to just go to page 24, Matt. This is kind of what we're doing. This is a summary of what we looked at for the St. Albans Street pump station. We got some photos here to back this up. You can see on the left, what we do is look at each of the major components at the pump station, everything, the building foundation, the roof, site, the dry pit, the electrical motor control center, the pumps, heating, ventilation, the structure, and the generator. And then what we do with the, from the left, if you're looking at kind of the second columns in, is then what we do is we rank the existing condition. And this is a combination, obviously, of the age, what the component is, and then how well it's been maintained. So the building foundation, we ranked it, as a 3, is fair. That's primarily a little bit lower, again, because of the age. And then the further column to the right indicates the year that it was installed. So in this case, 77. So it's original. Then what we try to do is project the remaining life. And then further to the right, we'll kind of note if there's been any replacement or upgrades or any kind of major concerns. It's this projected remaining life that we kind of use to really kind of come up with the priorities. And that's really what's used for planning purposes to kind of figure out, what needs to be done and when here over the next few years. Let's flip forward to, so we have kind of a similar format for each of the pump stations as we go through here. Let's go to page 30 here, Matt, please. So this is a summary of the pump stations. You can see there's nothing over the next couple of years that's critical. There's some things that we identified, in the 2 to 5 year range. The St. Albans Street pump station, the motor control center, unit heater. Again, that stuff dates back to the original 1977. The Trout Brook is probably the biggest need here. And that's, sees a relatively small flow, but the equipment in there is all, 40 plus years. There has been some repairs and maintenance as needed there, but the air compressors, motors, pressure tank control panel, the industrial park pump station, that's in good shape again, because that's only roughly 20 years old. So you don't have to worry or be concerned about the pumps. And when we're saying 6 to 10 years, the pumps are really going to be out closer to the 10-year with a control panel unit heater. That's about the point when it's approaching, 30 years. And the grinder pump stations, the village has been really proactive about, replacing those pumps and control panels. Don't see any needs there probably again until later, closer to the 10-year. The only real issue that we noted is, the hatches there needs repair. And again, that's something that's easily done, through the sewer budget with the village staff. I'm going to probably, the next section is on the wastewater treatment facility evaluation. And just to give you a little flavor, we really go through each of the treatment components in kind of the same fashion. Maybe just flip on the page 32, Matt. So what we do is we go through the liquid stream of how it flows through the plant. So this is really at the point where the wastewater enters the facility. This is what we call the influence structure. There's no issues with this location because this work was done in 2011, so it's not that old. And then separately, we're looking at the grit removal system, the existing headworks. Then we go to the anaerobic selector tank, the aeration tank, secondary clarifiers, the chlorine contact tank, and then we go back and we look at the sludge functions, the storage tank, and then we go into the control building and the chemical feeds. So we kind of follow this similar format. We've got a table for each of these different structures. Again, we rank what the existing condition is, document the year it was installed or maybe replaced, project the remaining life. And this is really what we use again as the basis for identifying the needs and the priorities. So Matt, if you want to go to page 49, please. So this is a summary of the components at the treatment plant. Nothing significant here in less than 2 years. We've got the headworks, the influence sampler, unit heater, got some exhaust work down in the control building. 2 to 5 years, the headwork structure, there's some concrete repairs on the top of the wall that are needed. There's some slide gates in the anaerobic selector that aren't working. The aeration tanks, replacing the diffusers. Those are just the rubber membranes. All the piping and all that was replaced a few years back. The air lines above grade are original. Those are ductile insulated. There are some couple leaks in there. The secondary clarifiers, all the internal components are scheduled for replacement. The clarifier drives, the collectors, and then we're getting down into the control building. There's some exterior doors, the metering pumps, and then a couple things in the lab. And then there's a bunch of other things that are out 6 to 10 years. So the good news, the village has been very good about replacing, major equipment and things over the years. Like, so for example, the grit system was replaced back in 2011. Some of the pumps were replaced back in 2011. The anaerobic selector, the mixers were replaced only about 2 years ago. The air piping down inside the aeration tanks has been replaced. The chlorine contact tank was new back in 2011. And then you're into the control building, electrical components, variable frequency drives, blowers. So because of that, this is a pretty reasonable and workable list. We get to some plants and this is a pretty lengthy list. And the reason that we kind of typically go out 2 to 5 years is that this can kind of form, depending on the community, the age of the plan, and how lengthy this list is. This can take some different forms moving forward. In your case, we're really just looking at the village continuing with the capital plan over the next few years. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail in the next section. Some communities have to really start looking at an upgrade. They may have $2.5–3 million worth of needs here. And that really, you can't do that out of your sewer budget or your capital. So you got to start looking at, other funding sources. And it takes 2 to 5 years to implement that. You've got to do the preliminary engineering, you got to get through a bond vote, you got to do design, and then it takes you a while to get through construction. Some of these facilities, there may not be any needs in the next 4 or 5 years, are relatively minor, but at year 5, they may need to start looking at more of an overall upgrade. So this can take some different, depending on the needs and, some other factors, this can take kind of a different form moving forward. Page 51, please, Matt. So this is really just kind of summarizing, what our findings were here. And generally, we're recommending, for the sewer collection side of things, the village is already working on looking at some of the vitrified clay pipelines, the stream crossings. We mentioned the G2, which was the concrete supports for the pump stations. We identified some things at the St. Albans pump station. There's some pretty major upgrade work required at the Trout Brook ejector station. And then, we just went through the list of items for the wastewater treatment facility. Now there's a much more detailed breakdown of each of these areas by year back in Appendix F. And, this was a great help because we did an initial cut at this. We basically set this up for 2021 through 2025. And then after that, there's another list of items, potentially which could be identified over the next 10 years. So we floated a draft of this out and it was a great help. We got input from the village, from Brian, Dave, and Matt. So we reworked this a little bit. So again, in the report in Appendix S, there's a detailed list by year of what we're proposing. Go to page 52, please, Matt. One of the things we typically try to do here is try to even out roughly what the costs are from one year to the next, but sometimes that's a little bit hard to do depending what the components are. But this kind of lays out what you're looking at over the next 5 years. And, you're looking at roughly, $450,000 over this 5-year period, which appears doable out of your capital plan. It's an average of about $91,000 a year, and the village can kind of choose to, maybe do something one year. You've got the flexibility. This is a little bit of a living document. And part of that is, things will change a little bit from year to year, but this really gives you a good solid base here over the next 5 years to set your capital budget up, talk about what you can afford to put in there. And you've got a good detailed list of things we've identified that, should be addressed here over the next 5 years. And again, this is all intended to, continue to maintain reliable operation of the plant moving forward. There's a couple items in here that are pretty big, which I'll just kind of refer to 2022, for example. Under pump stations, that's where we show the replacement of the Trout Brook pump station. That's a pretty big item in there. Under the 2021, under the treatment plant, you'll see $54,500. A big item under that is the overhaul of the secondary clarifiers. And then the the treatment plant in 2023, under that 62,000, the big item in there is the concrete wall repairs. Basically, the top of the wall, there's some cracking, both at the aeration tanks and the headworks. And then for 2024, just a bunch of miscellaneous items: the aeration tank diffusers, some chemical storage tanks, the air lines at the aeration tank. And then 2025 is a biggie for the wastewater plant. The big ticket item there is the replacing the motor control center, which is over 40 years old. And, some of the mechanical, and that also includes the motor control center, the electrical, and the heating ventilation down at the St. Albans pump station. So some of these things could be moved from year to year, but this kind of gives you a roadmap here with a good detailed list of items and needs and some budget cost. And the approach here is this is really going to kind of be done, with village resources and staff moving forward, just like you've done, many of these things over the prior years, and to try to keep affordable. And the good news, it doesn't appear that, you guys are looking at or have any need here, at least over the next few years to, get into a larger project that would, warrant looking at state funding or bond vote and those kind of things. So, okay. There's a bunch of information in the appendices just to kind of really give you indication. I'm not going to go through those in any detail, but in the figures in Appendix A, there's sewer collection system map. There's a site plan of the treatment plant. There is a copy of your discharge permit in there. There is a copy of the original basis of design, the 1977 for the treatment plant. And then we have manhole inspection sheets. So there's a sheet of each of the sewer manholes that was looked at that has detailed information on, type of structure, depths, any deficiencies. There's a photo noted, and we have the same thing with the stream crossing logs. And as I mentioned, there's a more detailed list of the specific items for each year with the budget costs, that were used to kind of help develop this capital plan here moving forward. Okay. So I just want to emphasize, I think the takeaway, we do a lot of these around the state for all different size and types of plants. And, I look at this again, the village has been proactive and continues to be proactive. And, considering that you've got a treatment plant that's, over 40 years old, it performs very well. It's been operated very well. You consistently maintain compliance with your effluent permit limits. You replace, upgrade things as you need to, and I'm sure that's going to continue. And this is kind of a report card that it really shows, you're in good shape there today, and moving forward.
Well, that's good. All in all, it sounds like the condition of the equipment, the capacity is good.
Yep.
That's good.
Yep. And it's a credit to the staff. You had Sam Gates and then Rodney, and obviously Brian and Dave have picked it up too. And, they've taken care of this stuff there. It's like anything else. You can have the best piece of equipment or whatever you have there, and if it's ignored and it's not maintained, it's not gonna, you're not gonna get 20 years out of it. So, it's really a credit to the staff and the resources and, the commitment of the board and, the staff there that's taking care of things as they should. Yep.
Absolutely. All right. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming in.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Good evening.
Even.
Thank you.
Good
If you
night,
guys,
Wayne.
yep. If you guys have any questions or thoughts on this, I know we went through a lot of information. There's a lot of detail in there, but feel free to reach out to Jonathan and, be glad to follow up with anything if you have. Okay.
Thanks again.
Excellent
Great.
report.
Good night. Good night. Thank you.
Okay. Up next, we have American Legion Post 42 requests to donate infrastructure located in Lincoln Park. Do we have a representative from the Legion here tonight?
Yes, this is Dan. Hi.
Hi, Dan.
Hello. I think Jonathan got a copy. We weren't able to have a meeting until last Thursday where we discussed everything. So I forwarded a one-page deed of gift and agreement. And I understand that you need time to look at it and run it through your attorney. So there's no rush, but there is one thing that we did discuss that I think you should be aware of is even our older members now are realizing that the Legion is aging out. We lose more members every year who pass away than we get new members in. And combine it with the fact that we've been shut down for 9 months this year and there's not really an end in sight. And none of us really know. We're guessing within a decade we may cease to exist. So I asked the question, what happens to our building and what do our bylaws say? And should we cease operations, we could sell the building because we own it. but we're required to donate everything we have to another charity. So another 501c something, 3/9/19. So that's a distinct possibility in the next, I'd say, 10 to 15 years. And that's why there's no real rush on gifting the Doughboy. But should we close and we haven't reached a conclusion on it, it would go to probably another Legion post in Franklin County.
Yeah, so I guess just to clarify with the board, the agreement that Dan mentioned, received that just today, which is why it wasn't in your packets. As Dan had said, it's just kind of a one-pager. But, you know, you guys haven't had a chance to look at it or read it at all. I did take a quick look at it this afternoon, but, you know, regarding the agreement that Dan sent over, you know, we could put it up on the screen, on the share screen if you want. But I would suggest that the trustees and the village get back to the Legion at a later date regarding the written agreement that Dan sent over today. Once we have a time to, you know, have more time to further review the document and have some suggestions formally made to Dan and the Legion about the written agreement. Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that statement he made so you guys understood a little better what he was talking about. Dan, is there anything else regarding, you know, an update or status of, you know, how the statue rehabilitation is coming along, or anything else regarding the properties on Lincoln Park that are owned by the Legion?
Well, as far as I'm aware, that's just the Doughboy is the only item in the park that we own, but you saw the messenger, obviously, and it was taken away and everything worked out without knowing what was underneath it. It could have been concrete, but thankfully they didn't concrete the thing to the ground. So you've seen the pole that's left and everything came out okay. So I feel pretty confident with the East Coast Copper guys. They have done historic object repair before. I plan to visit a couple of times. That's fine with them. They sent me a copy of the insurance policy. So if anything happens while it's at their facility, we're covered. And I truly believe they're going to do a good job. Everything I talk to them about, they're comfortable with and they've done before. So we're looking, and we did sign a contract with them, and we're looking at getting it back no later than the middle of May, in time for Memorial Day and potentially Vermont Thunder.
Okay, great.
And I did, one last item, I did finally get all the final information I needed for the grant from the Daughters of the American Revolution, and that package is completed. I passed it through Sean and Jim. They've taken a look at it and don't see any changes. So that will be going out in the mail to the DAR historical grant committee that's in upstate New York. That'll be going out this week. Deadline is at the end of December, so we'll be a little early. Should be notified if we get a grant in May sometime of next year. And we asked for $5,000. So.
All right, great. Regarding your comment of what the Legion owns in the park, you said you thought it was only the Doughboy statue. And if I'm wrong, we can have a discussion about this, but at least in the past, I've been told that you also own the fence that surrounds the Doughboy statue, as well as the flagpoles. And
well, no, you're right. The flagpoles, yes, but I thought the old chain link fence that was up, we did own that, but we were just a contributor to the new fence, and there were other organizations, volunteer groups, the Historic Society, the EBA, that donated for the new fence. So I wasn't really sure if we still owned it or not.
Okay. So maybe the Legion should talk about the fence. I mean, we, the village, was told many, many years ago that you owned the chain link fence that was there. You pulled that out, you being the American Legion, and replaced it with another fence. How you paid for it is, that's something that you guys jointly put together, but I haven't been told otherwise. My understanding was you still own that fence. And then another thing on the part that you guys own is the Vietnam War.
Memorial.
Right. So there's a few things other than the Doughboy that are on Lincoln Park that at least I've been told are owned by the Legion.
Jim,
That could be, and I've never disputed when this whole thing with the Doughboy started a year and a half ago, when I just asked a simple question, like, who owns it? It just went around and around, and it turns out we owned it, and I didn't dispute it at the time. If we owned it, it's our responsibility to bring it up to snuff and repair it and take care of it, and that's what we've tried to do. And anything else, that the gate, the fence, the old chain link, that was fine. We removed it. I know that Jim sent around an email where a bunch of people made some revisions to a proposal to donate the fence to the village. So I thought that was a separate issue because we were not the major contributor for the funds to do that, but that's something we can discuss.
Yeah.
Can I speak, Sam?
Yeah, sure.
Just Dan's last comments were the right ones, and that is that the Doughboy is theirs, and other folks have offered to help them with that. The fence is the communities of 3 or 4 organizations that put the money up to put it together. And then, if you remember, about 6 weeks ago, I talked about donating that it was the intention of the Legion to donate the Doughboy, and it made some sense for the community organizations to donate the fence. You folks asked for more clarity or what that meant. In particular, Sam, you did at that time. So I put together that draft email that went out 4 weeks ago, and then I just resent it back out to you guys, I think yesterday, the day before, to be consistent, which was to say, we bought the fence and we'd like to give it to you. You own it. And if you will, you're responsible for the maintenance or this or that into the future, which was trying to address your questions and to start the conversation. Then Dan's group just wanted and needed to go this contractual route, but the intent is the same. Via email, all the organizations that put money into the fence, the 4 different organizations have all said, yes, that was their intent. So, did we say in advance we're going to donate it? We just got it done, and it seemed to make sense to donate it to the town at the same time we were doing the Doughboy, to the village, pardon me.
Sam, I think Cindy Weed had a question as well.
Yes, Cindy, go ahead.
Yeah, there was no mention about the cannon. So I'm just asking about the cannon. Who owns the cannon?
Why don't we just add that to the letter too, and the Vietnam Memorial, and the village will just take all of it.
We just want to make sure that we put it all together, like Cindy said, in the language that everything is mentioned and everything is donated all at once. I just noticed that the cannon never was mentioned just now.
And nobody knows who owns the cannon?
Well,
I do. I do, and I'd like to be paid back for it.
Well, again, my understanding, what I have always been told, was the Legion owned the cannon. But, you know, there's been a lot of, over the years, you know, the village has tried to help the Legion. I know at least a couple of times since we've been here, we've had our Public Works Department paint the cannon for the Legion because it just needed to get done, and, you know, someone had to do it, so the village did it. But I've always been told that, like the Doughboy, like the fence, like the Vietnam Memorial, all those things were owned by the Legion. And the Legion has said that to me numerous occasions, that it's theirs.
Well, hang on just a sec, because when you say the Legion, having spent a lot of time.
I think we lost you, Dan. Are you still there?
He's still connected, Sam, but we don't seem to be getting audio.
Okay. Well, in any case, you know, I think the board, it warrants the board looking at the agreement that Dan sent over today. We can, as he said, there's no big rush on this, but, you know, the board should review that, get our comments in order that we want to send back to the Legion, and when we do that, then we'll give them that update and continue to review that document. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, that's
Sure.
good. We'll take a look at it and get back to the Legion.
Sam, I think Sandy Ferlin had a question.
I just wondered if there is anything in the archives of the Enosburg Historical Society that might give you some of the answers about the ownership, particularly something as old as the cannon. Maybe Janice Giraud would have that answer for you.
I can check with her. We can also take a quick look through the green book and see if anything jumps out. But just as an observer, all of the cannon and those things were all within that chain link fence. So it gives the impression that they belong together to the owners, whoever those were. So I think we should include all of those items, and we can all sign off if we have to. The people that
Then
donated
include the
to
monument,
fence. The what?
the big monument.
Well, same thing. So anybody who wants to join in giving it away, but you know, the Historical Society, the EBA, the Legion, maybe we can be co-signers, so we make sure that we give everything away all at once.
I think
Am I
Dan
back?
yeah, you're back, Dan.
Okay, sorry, I dropped out. So I missed the last couple of minutes. I heard what Cindy said, and we're fine with that. And the only reason we have a contract for the Doughboy is all the articles in the park. The Doughboy's got an appraised replacement value that's fairly significant. And other than our building, it's the largest asset the Legion owns.
So I guess going forward from here, Dan, the board will review that contract, and I guess we'll reach out to you or a representative from the Legion.
Please, me.
Okay.
I'm the one. I'm the designated person who speaks about the Doughboy.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? All right. Thanks for coming on, Dan.
Sure.
Have a good evening.
All right, you too.
Okay. Up next, we have NWCUD to donate a Wi-Fi device and have mounted. And we have Sean with us tonight. Good evening, Sean.
Everyone.
Hi, Sean.
Oh, I guess I can get this the conversation started anyway. In your packets, you'll see an email that was sent from Sean Kyle. Sean is, in addition to being the town of Enosburg's Community Development Director, he's also the chair of the Northwest Communication Union District. And Sean was interested in looking at putting up some additional Wi-Fi devices on utility poles that are near Lincoln Park, kind of on the corner of Main Street and Missisquoi Street. So Sean, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I can give you guys, so basically the CUD received a public service department grant, and a part of this grant, a portion of it, we allocated funds to fund Wi-Fi hotspots in public areas where communities had a need. Not every community got them. Also it's could they logistically figure out a way to get them operational. You got to have an existing connection. It has to be adequate enough. There's all sorts of little stipulations there. So it's gone through a couple different rounds. There were still funds remaining. So currently Enosburg has 2 public Wi-Fi hotspots. One is at the Emergency Services Building on the right corner of the building. It kind of serves that side of the parking lot, as well as the kind of down into somewhat of the kind of soccer little league field there. It reaches down into there even. There is a new spot that's been up for maybe about 2 weeks. We're still kind of making sure everything's good with that one. I think it's fine. Usually we put them up before we start advertising it too much. We want to test it, make sure everything's fine. So that spot is underneath the front porch of the town office. That's been there for a little while now. With this new one, we have an opportunity to extend what is done at the town office down the street, serving a portion of Main Street, Lincoln Park, and not too much further, maybe that block there. I'm not sure if it would reach kind of where the diner used to be or not. I don't believe it would reach that far down Main Street, but it would serve kind of that gap between the town office and probably like halfway down that block past Missisquoi, and a good portion of Lincoln Park. When we were looking at putting in some hotspots previously, Lincoln Park came up often as it'd be great if that was something that was available for the public. We, for those that remember, we did a community survey coming up on 2 years now, where we surveyed the community and had asked them about, that was one of the questions we had asked, is did they feel it was a good idea? 71% of the respondents felt that that would be a positive addition to the communities to have free public Wi-Fi. So it's something that we've been working on for a little while. Through the CUD, we've had some available funding. These aren't cheap. They are kind of high end. It's not something you can run down to Best Buy and grab. It's a professional, high quality, enterprise grade router system that the state is helping us deploy these products. It's a Cisco Meraki system, which is really high end. It includes the software licenses and installation. A technician comes and installs them. This request is a little bit different. When the gentleman came up to install the one at the town, I had him look. I said, hey, if we were to get another one of these, at the time we didn't know if we could get another one, what would be the ideal location? And he identified a utility pole at the corner of Main Street and Missisquoi on the park side, so across the street from the Masonic Temple. That he felt that was the ideal location to kind of serve most of the park. There you go. Thanks, Matt. So it's kind of roughly right there. Now I know there's a standard utility pole. I don't know the terminology. There's a shorter one behind it. Honestly, either one of those could work. The installation is somewhere between 10 and 15 feet on the pole. Obviously, we don't want to interfere with any of the lines or electrical that's on there. We don't want to get up into any of that business, so nothing needs to get relocated. The device does require power. That's the only connectivity that it needs. It doesn't need an Ethernet. We don't have to run lines to it or anything like that. Simply, it just needs to be powered, and it will feed off of it'll feed off the broadband backbone from the town office.
Sean, could you run through some of the pros and cons
Yep.
of putting the Wi-Fi device up that we had talked about earlier?
Yep. So I'll go over some of the cons. For obvious reasons, it's a public Wi-Fi network, similar to really any other public space that has this. So obviously security is always a concern because it is an open network. So people don't want to be doing their banking or doing any sort of private information on there. We very much can take additional measures to help protect that. We've blocked certain websites and torrents and downloading from peer-to-peer and things like that. So we can take some steps to block some of that, but obviously you still want to be cautious about that. Along with that, we can set some parameters and time limits so someone's just not constantly sitting on there. And that's something that we've looked into and we've experimented with at the emergency services building, having kind of like a 45-minute to an hour time limit. So then that way someone's not just, especially the ones downtown, because there are residences nearby. So someone can't just jump on there and just use it as their home internet connection. One of the concerns that John had brought up was parking. Users could or may utilize parking spaces. And there has been a history that businesses on Main Street have expressed some frustrations regarding the lack of parking. So that's something that we wanted to address. This morning, I did raise that with the business association, which I had previously done. The business association, I got this late, John. I can send this to you now. The business association did send in a letter of support, should it be needed. That they, as an organization, support the idea. And we did address the parking issue, and everyone felt it was the positives outweighed the potential negatives of that. So I haven't had a chance to go business to business of the businesses that could or may be affected by at least this one. But overall, they felt that the potential for someone to, run in and grab a cup of coffee or run in to grab a snack here or there, rather than, someone just sitting in their car for hours watching Netflix. Then no one felt that might be the case. So that was something that was addressed this morning, and the EBA did send a letter of support for that. Kind of a pro-con, just based off of the backbone. It's got a fairly low broadband backbone. It's not top of the line. It's not gig speeds. Someone's not going to be able to do streaming or gaming off of this network. It's going to be limited to browsing the web, emails, doing some video calls. It'll have limited capacity, so likely only maybe 3 to 5 users at a single time could even use it, just because of the backbone. So it's kind of a pro-con. So someone can't do a whole lot with it, but it also works out in the favor where you're not going to have a ton of people using that. Pros, free public access. There's a big statewide push. The CUD's goal is to get connectivity to those underserved and unserved. This was a temporary, let's not call it temporary. This was a quick solution under CARES Act to use up some funding that's available this year that had to be utilized by the end of December. There was no way the CUD was in a position to start laying fiber optic cables this year. So this was a solution that we can provide, at least a location should somebody have connectivity at home that is poor or no connectivity. I've had a handful of folks. Ellen, I see you're on the call. I know Ellen has been a user of the one at the emergency services building a handful of times. I've had Polly Rico, a select board member, has had to go there and do a select board call because her network went out at home. So that's the type of case that we want to try to help out. Then we have emergency management tool. Should broadband to the entire community go down, these devices are still talking to one another. So as long as they have power, we can still broadcast simple messaging and simple pages through various examples during the Houston hurricanes. They had a mesh network similar to this, obviously on a much larger scale. This is 2 or 3 hotspots. Houston was able to have their emergency management teams use their existing mesh network as a tool to help communicate, because cell towers were knocked out. They had all sorts of issues down there. So this can be a tool for that as well. And gateway to the community, something that I know Newport has talked about doing this. Woodstock does this. They treat the network as a gateway to the community virtually. It kind of serves as a virtual welcome center where it can show events. Basically it's a splash page, similar if you were to travel and go through an airport or a train station or something like that, and you jump on a public access network. You get that first page that kind of usually it's the home page to whatever facility you're in, or kind of information of what's happening in the area. We can very much do the exact same thing with this network when we're ready. So we can build a simple page that shows current events, places to eat, places to stay. We can kind of replicate our little trifold that we made not too long ago. It can kind of be a virtual version of that, and show folks information of what's in town and things to do.
It sounds like this is fairly modular. Like you can add on more.
Yes. As long as we can they're about to get the device, the license, and to have them installed. It's roughly around $2,800 is a really low price. Usually it's around $3,500 to $4,000 per device for like this kit. So they're not cheap, but yeah, we could absolutely expand upon this. We could work our way down Main Street. There's been discussions with the SU to try to collaborate with the SU more and try to identify locations around schools that might be able to help. I know this Enosburg, I've been working with Dominic DeRocha with the SU to talk to him about, he's a member of the CUD as well, to identify locations that might work in the future. Right now, we're coming up in the end of our funding. We're running out of time to utilize the funds that we have. So that's probably something that will happen again in the future. But absolutely, yeah, we can extend it as long as we have a backbone somewhere. We can extend this and move it down streets and provide a larger network.
In that case, I make a motion that we accept this gift of free Wi-Fi.
Second that.
All right, we have a first from Cindy and a second from Heather. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, thank you, Sean.
Yep, thank you.
John, I believe the second item is approval to attach to the pole, correct?
Sure is.
Stipulations around that.
The next item on the agenda is Ellen's request for put the signage up, but you're talking about
that device mounted. I believe that's on a power pole right on the corner of Lincoln Park, right?
Right. Well, and so that's something we didn't really, I don't think, get into with Sean's explanation and presentation of the request, but Sean and I did talk about this issue a little bit on the phone last week, and the regulation of pole attachments, utility pole attachments, is pretty strict and all highly regulated by our state government. I had asked Sean, who the intended owner of the device ultimately would be, and the CUD does not want to actually own the device. They want the village to become the owner of the device, which in a way would actually be better regarding the pole attachment issues, because we are one of the owners. We're a joint owner of the utility pole. We already have infrastructure on the poles, so we wouldn't have to go and apply for additional attachment rights to put something on the pole. Whereas if the CUD were to own the device, the Wi-Fi device, they would actually have to go through our state government and apply through a tariff to be able to have the permission to put the device on the utility pole. Not anyone can just go and throw stuff up on a utility pole. It's actually highly illegal to do things like that. So even posters and stuff like that aren't supposed to be attached to utility poles, and we try to enforce that in our community, although I know a lot of parts of the state and the country just don't have the resources to do that. But anyway, so yeah, I think as part of the request, the CUD is asking that the village take ownership of the device. So once it's up and operational, my understanding, Sean, is you guys you're gonna actually put it up and get it operational. But as soon as you've got it to that point, you want to fully donate the device to the village, which means it would become our responsibility at that point. So, just want to point out, not that I'm trying to, be difficult about this, but it is going to be relatively low to the ground. So, which means there is a potential for vandalism. Hopefully that wouldn't happen, but it could. So, if somebody threw a rock at it or something and, damaged it, the village then would, need to be responsible for replacing it, I presume. Is that the assumption, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that one of the good things, they're metal. That's one good thing. They're high grade outdoor access points. I think with that in mind, with Vermont winters and the potential to get kind of banged up from time to time, and that obviously you don't want someone hitting it with a stick, but again, the installer has mentioned, based on what's on the pole and access to power, in a range of 10 to 15 feet on the pole is his ideal height.
And if those kids want to use their phone in the park, they'll leave it alone.
So just to be clear, Sean, CUD isn't requesting that there be a Wi-Fi hotspot there. They're just donating that one particular unit. So in the event that it does get damaged to the point where it's not usable, the village doesn't have to replace it.
Nope. Oh, it's we're the CUD is basically gifting, which we did with the town. We're gifting the device itself, the hardware, the license, and then the installation.
Okay.
Do I need to amend the motion to put it on the poll as well, or are we good?
No, I think you're good, because they're gonna, if you're gonna give, well, maybe you should amend it to give the CUD the permission to put it on the poll on behalf of the village, with the understanding that as soon as they've completed that task, they're gonna donate it to the village.
Okay, so I motion that we accept the gift fully installed on the utility pole from the CUD.
Second that.
All right, that one sounded better. We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay, that's that. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
So, kind of along the same lines of this, we have Ellen Stanley with us tonight requesting for some signage for those Wi-Fi hotspots.
Hi. Sorry, I didn't get my picture in with your attachment. I Googled, there we go. I Googled Wi-Fi signs after the Enosburg Initiative meeting a couple weeks ago, and this was what I found. So obviously they're not very big. They're definitely not gonna like attract serious attention, but they're a place to start in any case. And so two of them are up at the EMS building, like for people who are at like a T-ball or a Little League game so that they could see that there would be Wi-Fi. And then one of them is hopefully going to go on the town office where the one is there. And I have two left. And so they are like sticky on the back, but Jonathan was saying, like, I think it does make the most sense to drill a hole just so it doesn't fall off. And I don't know if you guys, if you look at the park, there's two signs like on either side of the Doughboy that say like, this park is not open after midnight or something. They're like white signs. Or there's also like the two dog poop like bag holder signs. So I would like to please donate these signs to the town to put up.
Village.
And Jonathan suggested that they go to Public Works so they could drill the hole in them. And I am more than happy to check periodically and make sure that they haven't faded or anything, but I would like to donate them and take them to Public Works. And it doesn't matter to me which pole they go on. It might be more visible on the dog ones, but it's up to you guys. And if you don't feel like that's a good idea, then I can find another place for them. But there were 5 in the package that I bought.
Okay, Ellen, if you looked at the sign in the park about the park information, closing hours and this and that, is there room enough for a sign on there, or you think you want to put it on the pole?
Oh, my thought was, since those poles have like holes in, like they're like the four-sided poles that have the holes in them, that you could just put a bolt through and have this sign on the pole, not stuck to the sign.
Okay, so you want one of those Wi-Fi signs on each one of those park information signs?
Either way, yes, whatever sign makes the most sense.
What does the board think?
Could it make sense?
Sounds good.
Yeah,
I think-
thank you.
Yeah, if we put them on the park information signposts, then all the information would be right there. All right.
Agreed.
Do we need a motion for that, John?
Yeah, probably it would be a good idea since, they're being donated by a private person to the community, just, recognizing the donation and, also approval to have the Public Works Department install the signs, wherever it makes the most sense, as Ellen said, find whichever signpost that already exists in the park that's good and visible and put them on there. But that'll take the Public Works Department's labor to do that. So it probably would be good just to acknowledge that as well.
Yep, I'll hear a motion to accept the gifts of the Wi-Fi hotspot signs and to hang them in the park.
I'll make the motion.
Jason with the first,
Second.
Leonard with the second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay.
So on point of clarification, who was the second on that?
Uh,
Sounded like Cindy.
I was.
Sorry, okay.
Leonard's still muted. That's okay. I can be Leonard.
It was a, but okay, thank you, Alan.
No worries. Just let me know. I can bring them to Matt or the village office, or I can take them to Public Works. Either way, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay, I think you just drop them off at the office and they'll see you.
Yeah, I think that'd be best, Ellen. Just drop them off down here and we'll get them to Gary or to Ken. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you.
Ellen.
All right, up next on the agenda, we have the annual village meeting for 2021.
Yeah, so if the board looks in your packet, you'll find a number of different documents that I put in there related to this topic. So Things will undoubtedly be a little bit different this coming year regarding annual meeting because of the pandemic. Does not look like COVID-19 is going to leave us before March. So having some foresight about that and wanting to be proactive in giving the municipalities that exist within its borders, our state legislature actually passed some temporary legislation. So this is not meant to be permanent, but it's meant to be in effect through 2021. They're obviously assuming that at least through a good part of 2021, people are not going to be able to meet publicly and still meet all of the requirements that are laid out currently in our state regarding social distancing and public meetings. So, you'll find in here kind of a summary that was written up by Vermont League of Cities and Towns. I also put the actual act on the temporary legislation that was passed by the Vermont legislature in October of this year. It's referred to as Act 162. So there's a copy of that in there for the board to peruse at your pleasure if you want to read it. It's actually not too long. It's just a couple of pages. Then I put some correspondence in your packets as well between myself and our attorney, Jesse Bugby, on the subject. And Jesse's just sort of confirming what my understanding is about this temporary legislation and what the options are for municipalities in Vermont going into March of 2021's annual meetings. So basically we have two options that we can hold annual meeting on, two models, if you will, in which we can conduct an annual meeting. So the first is we can hold a physical meeting if the board chooses, and we are able to meet all of the other standards and regulations that the state has put into place at that time. So remember, there may be some things that we don't know about now that could potentially, come into effect in March. But if the board feels confident that we can meet all of those standards, known and unknown, we can hold a physical meeting. The second option is for this year only. As I said, this is temporary legislation. The state legislature is allowing municipalities in Vermont to hold their annual meeting by Australian ballot, even if you aren't under your municipal charter allowed to do so. So we are not actually allowed to do so under our municipal charter. We normally hold our annual meeting from the floor, meaning you got to physically be present in the room in order to vote on articles in the annual warning. But for this year, under Act 162, they would allow municipalities, if the board chooses to hold the meeting by Australian ballot. Now, part of a condition of holding a meeting by Australian ballot is you must, prior to the day the vote is going to take place, you must hold what's called an informational meeting. And in the informational meeting, you go over, whatever topics would normally be voted on, either by ballot or by hand. If you had, a sit-down meeting. And now the other thing that they wrote into Act 162 that I think makes this a good option is that although they will not allow you to hold your annual meeting electronically, So you can't, that's not an option to hold the annual meeting electronically. They will allow you, if you're going to do this by Australian ballot, to hold the informational meeting electronically. So I think this is, a good option. It's something the board should seriously consider. And that's, in a nutshell, basically what the two options are for municipalities next year to hold their annual meetings. There's not a big time pressure right now to make the decision. If you want some time to think about this a little bit, you can. You aren't actually required to make the decision until you finalize your warning. So that for us won't be until around the end of January that you would typically finalize the warning. But obviously, the more notice we can put out there to the public that we're going to do it this way, the better, I think. So I would, hesitate from waiting till the very last day when you approve the warning, if you can help it. Yeah.
So if we take the Australian ballot route, there wouldn't be a physical town meeting.
That's correct. So we would hold an electronic informational meeting sometime prior to the day that people go in to vote by Australian ballot on whatever items we're asking the public to vote on. So that would be, and in this case, it would be everything. So they would vote for their elected officials by Australian ballot, which typically we do. We have a little bit of a different system here in Enosburg Falls. We actually have a hybrid system of doing this that isn't completely covered under state statute, but be that as it may, this is how this community decided to do things. And we normally vote for our elected officials by Australian ballot, but everything else is done from the floor. So in this case, under this scenario, everything would be done by Australian ballot, the elected officials and anything else that we are asking the voters to, weigh in on and actually cast a vote on.
But voters would have to physically show up somewhere in order to vote.
Not necessarily. They could still request an absentee ballot and mail that absentee ballot in or drop it off at the village office. We have a drop box, so they could drop it off in the drop box and we could get it to the village clerk, who's Andy Bolio, and Andy will still, of course, be responsible for running the elections. That's his job as municipal clerk to do that. But it wouldn't, if people chose not to, physically go into a room to cast their vote, they wouldn't have to. They could get an absentee ballot.
Go ahead.
Sam, I saw something in the paper, but I didn't read the whole article. Do municipalities have the ability to just send absentee ballots to everybody like we did for the presidential election? Well, that the state did, not local municipalities, but could we do that? Is that an option?
I don't know, Heather. That's a good question for our clerk, Andy Bolio, to investigate. If that were done, he would have to do it as village clerk. He is the one responsible for running the elections for the village. And I don't know, it's a good question. We could ask Andy to research that and look into it for us.
And a follow-up to that is, would there be potential to, because the village voting is the week after the town, right? That's what we do. Would we be able to have it be the same day in the same location so people wouldn't have to go out more?
As the town?
I don't know. Like, so it's officially town meeting day. I don't know if that complicates things. It just came to mind.
I think it would, because we're two separate municipalities. I don't know. It would also throw off our budget and annual report schedule.
Worried about that.
Yeah, because that would push everything. We'd lose a week basically in the schedule that we have right now. But beyond that, I do think it would probably complicate things a little bit, because we are two separate municipalities, and you don't want to, I don't think you want to confuse people about that.
Okay.
So for example, just, something to think about, we could still keep March 9th as the voting day, the day that people would go in and vote by Australian ballot, which typically we would just say is our annual meeting date, and then hold the informational meeting the night before. So that the 9th is a Tuesday, so that the night before, which would be then March 8th, a Monday night, we could hold the informational meeting. Typically, that's how towns that vote by Australian ballot anyway, and there are a lot of towns across the state that do this every year anyway. This is how they do it. They don't have physical meetings from the floor. Everything is voted on by Australian ballot. And if you want to ask a question about something, then your time to ask that question is at the informational meeting the night before you go in to vote the next day. Just throwing that schedule out there as a possibility. But if you wanted to do it, the Friday before or the Thursday before, that could work too. But
So it doesn't have to be the night before.
Doesn't have to be, but that's normally how towns that vote by Australian ballot do it. They usually hold the informational meeting the night before, and the next day you open for people to go in and cast their ballot votes.
I would recommend if we chose to do that to maybe not do it the night before. I hear a lot of feedback from people that have experienced that they don't have enough time to really respond to some of the new knowledge that they've gained. It's the
I was
night
wondering
before.
with absentee ballots and being able to get them in on time.
Right.
Well, that's up to you. I mean, if you still got to get it in by 7 p.m. I don't think that the time would have to change. And Andy would have to, if people are down here, dropping off their absentee ballots at the village office at 7 p.m., he's just got to make sure he's down here in the village office, and at 7:01 p.m. he put some kind of container or something over the drop box so that people can't put any absentee ballots into the drop box any longer. Yeah, it'll be I mean, I'm not saying there
We
won't be
normally
some.
do the informational meeting and then vote the next day.
That's
It's
correct.
usually-
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Usually you do it the night before, and then the following day you open for people to cast their
I think
votes.
I'm,
I think Brian was asking a question about, well, what do you do about those absentee ballots then? How are you going to keep track of them? And
more the mail-in part of it. If somebody were to mail
Right.
them in, yeah, having the time to just
Right,
a thought.
it's-
It's really not my business, but
yeah, no, and it's a good thought, and it's something Andy's going to have to think about, but he's going to have to be here or have someone that he designates to be down here at the village office to, at 7:01 p.m. to put some kind of container over, or we just lock the front door vestibule or something so that people can't continue to drop absentee ballots in there. And we're still going to have a location where people can come and cast their vote physically if they want to. I think you still have to provide that option for people. So, you know, Andy's gonna have to sort of split his resources in a couple different ways. He'll have to have enough people to man the actual polling place where people are physically casting their votes. And he's gonna have to have someone down at the village office watching the drop-in box to make sure no one continues to put absentee ballots in after 7 p.m.
Some communities did a drive-through. They set up a drive-through voting back in November, and it seemed pretty successful. So I don't know if there's space, if it's feasible to do it down by the village offices.
What does that gain you over the drop box?
Then he doesn't have to be in two places at once.
Or we could put up a drop box at the same
Well, they could
polling
still put
place,
them
just
in.
have it
They could,
outside.
they could still put it in the drop box though.
That's true, but because you were saying that they have to have a physical place to be able to vote if they
Yeah,
wanted
I
to
think you
walk up.
still have to provide that. But it sounds like you guys have a lot of questions about how the votes are going to be cast themselves, which I'm not the expert on. Those kinds of questions really need to be answered by Andy Bolio. So if you want, you know, we can ask Andy to come in at your next meeting or something and, you know, give you a presentation about how he would propose to manage that if you guys chose to go with the Australian ballot system that is being offered by the legislature.
Matt, did you have something?
Oh, it's been answered. Thank you.
Yeah, just kind of going back to the informational part, I think that if we do choose to do the Australian ballot, maybe just have like a really good campaign of getting information out there for people who are choosing to vote early.
Do we want to have Andy come in next meeting so we can answer some of these questions? I mean, we still have a lot of time. We got a couple months, but.
Because you might want to give him more than just the next meeting. I mean, he's going to have to do some research and a lot of figuring this out.
All right, so let's all think about this, and then maybe sometime in December, or not December, what month is it?
January.
January or early February, we can have Andy come in and answer some questions, and we can make a decision then.
Well, it'd
I had
have
a
to be,
question.
you've got to make the decision before you approve the warning, which is going to be late January. When you approve the warning. You can't put it off any longer than that. So, you know, if you don't want to do it next meeting, then I'd say we can have him come in, you know, the first part of January sometime. Remember, we meet every week in January.
Yeah, yep. Jason, do you have a question?
Yeah, and with what Heather was talking about, are we able to like send the information out like through social media or something beforehand? And then have the question.
Yeah, or we can even slip something in.
Period, like when we hold the informational meeting for questions, but have the information out there beforehand, like on what they're going to vote for. Like the presentation with the items or whatever.
Yeah, so I think what you're asking is, could staff put together sort of like a frequently asked questions sort of one-page sheet or something? We don't even know for sure right now what items are going to be up for vote on the warning or on the ballot.
I meant like when they're able to mail in their votes, like have the information on what they're going to be voting on.
Matt?
Yeah, okay.
If I could suggest, we see Andy on a pretty much a daily basis here in the office. I can certainly raise to him what the board is considering and the information that they're looking for. Give him an opportunity, as Cindy pointed out, to do some research and get some answers to the questions that have already been raised tonight. I can relay those to him, and he can come back and present to the board and answer any additional questions you have. And he can probably give us a lot of details about how to make sure that we send out the right information along with the Australian ballot so that the voters actually know what it is that they're choosing with each of the articles that's been presented in the notice.
That sounds like a good
Yeah,
idea.
It's a good idea. And, you know, just kind of going back into like the awareness and stuff, because I know like there's the village report and stuff that we send out too, just maybe more of a campaign of, if we're not doing this in person, like, please come to meetings. It's also an opportunity to ask questions of us.
Yeah, and there, you know, the state is going to definitely have requirements regarding this too, which we will have to follow. This will be new. It'll be new for a lot of people around the state, because although a lot of towns already do this anyway, they hold their annual votes by Australian ballot. There's still a lot of communities, us included, that hold their annual meetings from the floor. So, you know, this is going to be new for a lot of towns across Vermont this year.
Yeah, definitely a lot of changes this year.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll work through them. You know, it's just, it's going to be a process. It's going to be a little bit different, but, you know, like doing our electronic meetings, you know, at first we were all kind of rookies at it. I think I had only been in virtual meetings maybe 2 or 3 times before the pandemic hit, you know, and now we're all old pros at it, you know, and we'll learn it. We'll learn how to make this work. And if you guys choose to go with the Australian ballot route, which honestly I think is probably going to be a better route for us, given all the unknowns about the pandemic and whether we can really meet the requirements of having a physical meeting or not. I think that's going to be the best route for us, but it is your decision as a board to make. So yeah, I think the next step then is to have Andy come in. We'll let him know, you know, what kinds of questions are on your mind, and he can give a presentation to you guys, and hopefully you can feel more comfortable about that.
All right, sounds good. Does anybody else have any other questions? All right, so let's move on to setting the 2021 water and wastewater allocation fees.
Yes, so again, board wants to flip in your packets. You've got quite a bit of material regarding what the water and wastewater rates are, and also a pretty deep dive that Matt put together from a finance perspective on, you know, what those allocation fees mean for their respective departments and, you know, what their purpose is. So that was, I think, some good support information that Matt put together for you guys to take a look at. But bottom line is, for wastewater, our allocation fees for 2020 are currently $2,997 per unit. The last time we did an increase in the wastewater allocation fees was in 2012, so 8 years ago. And for water, those allocation fees are currently $500 per unit. Staff is not recommending a change in either of those departments. So staff is recommending keeping those allocation fees the same for 2021, respectively, for each department.
That's good news.
Yeah.
All right, if nobody has any objections to that, I'll hear a motion to set the water and wastewater allocation fees the same as they were in 2020.
I'll make the motion.
Heather with the first, I have a second.
I'll second that.
Leonard with a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. All right, it's unanimous. Okay, up next, we have Enosburg Initiative Report with Jim Cameron.
Sam,
Yeah, hi.
oh, he's still there.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
How much of a delay is there?
A little bit.
That's
He
a wood
roasted
stove.
So
marshmallows.
you got fireflies in a jar there, Jim,
Yeah,
or what?
exactly. I thought that was much nicer than looking at me. I'm in the weird uncle mode tonight, so. Okay, so first off the bat, in keeping with the rest of the night, I have a 2007 Tacoma. I'd like to donate that to the village.
Perfect, we'll take it.
Come on, go with it.
How's the mileage? Any rust?
190,000, and I just got it inspected. No, all right, okay. I thought that was a pretty good line. I really have just a few things to mention to you. One is that there's a grant program that's out there now that's new and quite generous. It's the Paul Brune grant. The Opera House got $50,000 last year, and the range is from 50 to 100,000. I actually read the minutes of your last joint meeting where Cindy Lee came and spoke about the need that the Historic Society had. And letting you know that I and Sean have been talking to go away from that first grant they were looking at to go towards this one, which doesn't require a match, by the way. So it's a very nice grant. And they lengthened the application time so to let other people get in, which tells me they didn't get as many applications as they would have liked. So Sean, I, and Cindy are talking about moving that forward. It's fine, Sean's not there, but he contacted her. So there's a positive thing there. And then I contacted, for the moment, I'll just go with this. This is a teaser, but I contacted a property owner on Main Street, and I'm going to be talking with Preservation Trust to see if we can apply for that grant for some facade work in that $50,000 to $100,000 range. I have a meeting with that person next week. Dave and Sally Trihorn continue to deserve Citizen of the Year awards. David and actually Pierre last weekend completed a new roof over the access to the food shelf. And we dropped off incredibly heavy pavers for them this last week to create a new walkway for the food shelf. And then we're waiting to hear from them for some support. When I say them, pardon me, the food shelf. They want to do some interior renovations from a temporary safety perspective around COVID, but they've yet to come up with a unified plan. So when they come up with that, we've offered to help them put that together. Probably what I could have or should have started out with, and it's turned into a little bit more than I would have liked it to or needed it to, which is 4 organizations got together and took care of the old fence. The old fence, we'll just go with it, that it was about the fence in Lincoln Park. And when it turned out, 4 groups got together and bought that fence, I offered, this is a little bit of a repeat of the earlier conversation, but that I came to the trustees meeting, 4 or 6 weeks ago. You folks asked for some, basically more information, more backup. That's been written and edited, and I sent it out to you. I really am looking for now, I guess, any other concerns or questions you have about our groups, our 4 groups coming together to donate that fence to the park. It just made sense to us. It's, as you know, it's a brand new fence. It's pretty high quality. So my question is, for you to accept that gift, do you have any more questions or need any more paperwork other than the document that I sent you in the email that all the organizations would sign and turn over to you.
I think Cindy raised a good point earlier about the cannon and the Vietnam Memorial.
Yeah, I think I'd like to lump that together with the Legion's contract, because the fence is really not owned by the Legion. It's, if you will, owned by 4 different nonprofit volunteer organizations. Some are, you know, some have a 501c3, some don't, whatever. It was a community effort. It seems like made sense to not have it be owned by 3 or 4 other people, but by the village. It's an amenity to the village. It's an addition, free of charge. So like my 2007 Tacoma, which would come with a slight fee, the fence is free. So back, what other questions might you have to accept that donation?
I don't have any.
Did you submit a copy of that draft to the village, Jim?
Well, it did via an email. It just went, it's been out before, and I resent it maybe last Thursday or Friday, saying here's the last best edit. And do you have any questions? It wasn't meant to finalize to be signed. It was basically trying to provide you with the information you wanted. All the organizations had a chance to see that and edit it.
Matt?
I did see I was copied on the email when that originally went out. I think John was as well. I think it would be good if the organization would actually present that as a Word document that could be distributed to the board, and then they can review it, much like they want to review the document that the Legion has proposed before they would take any formal action. That's just a suggestion.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Understood. Yeah.
There is one
I'm
other.
fine with that. Go ahead.
There is one other thing I would just point out, Jim, about the fence. It is tied into the agreement that the Legion sent over to us today. I don't know if you picked up on that or not, but there is reference to the fence and control of the fence that the Legion would maintain even if the village ended up approving this agreement. So you may want to look at that. There still seems to be some intertwinement with the Legion regarding the fence.
John, I didn't pick that up. I certainly believe you, but I didn't pick that up. I don't know why Dan did that. Earlier in the night, he verbally agreed. He agreed with what I had said, and that is that they were a part owner of the fence, and why they included that in their document, I don't know.
Yeah, it's under section. It's under section 4 of the agreement, so you might want to just take a look at that.
Yeah, I scanned it. I certainly didn't pick up the fence, or I would have addressed it before. Hang on. No, I think, actually, I'm trying to imagine what else there would be significant to keep you here for. And I really can't. As the COVID thing gets deeper, it's harder for us to generate energy and things. The weather's here now, which slows us down. We do continue to have a planning meeting every other Thursday that's attended by anywhere from 6 to 10 people, talking about what we can do, could do, should do. And a lot of little things are happening out of that, but not much major. That's really the deal.
Okay, so Jim, do you want to get back to the village with a, I guess, finalized request from those representative groups that own the fence for approval?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, we'll do that then.
I'll have it ready for your next meeting for you to look at. Okay?
Sounds good.
Jim?
Thank you.
Jim?
Yep.
If you could get that to staff maybe a week before the meeting so that we can review it and mark up comments so that we can make sure it gets into the board packet for their review.
Yes, understood.
Great, thank you.
Okay, is that all there was for EI report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. I'll be looking forward to that truck. Delivery would be. All right. So up next is manager's report. What do you have for us, John?
First, I want to give you guys just a heads up here. Over the course of this past year, it's become very apparent to us that the electric department could really use another position. Sam Valancourt and I have spoken on this, and I've also been discussing this through the last several months with staff in the electric department as well. It is, of course, up to the Board of Trustees. It's your decision as to whether this would be approved or not. But I wanted to let you know that in the 2021 preliminary budget, which you'll be receiving December 30th, there will be a new position in the electric department. We'll hold that out as a separate line item so you can see what the associated costs are for that new position. But I wanted to make you guys aware of that at least for your preliminary budget, your first draft that you guys are going to look at, there is going to be a new position in there in the electric department. The position itself would be entitled superintendent. This would be a department head position. So we'd be looking to hire a new person that would head the department, and that position would have split duties between administration and the electric department office, and also working as a lineman in the field. This is actually a position that the village had up until 2016. It was held by Greg Clark. And when Greg Clark retired in 2016, due to some changes in personnel and a desire within the staff of the department to try a different model, we decided to eliminate that position and try a new model in which we had the public works director assuming some of the administrative duties that the former superintendent had been doing. Some things have changed over the past few years in the department. We're now down to only 2 first-class linemen. Back in 2016, we had 3, and then one apprentice that we knew we were going to have to train and bring along, and it would take a few years to do that, but we had 3 first-class linemen. We're now down to 2 first-class linemen and 2 apprentices and a utility person. The accident we had in July of this year, I think, really showed us some areas where we need to improve in the department. And so been talking with Dave Westcom about this as well. This is something that he also would be in favor of. Dave's title is currently lead line technician, and he would be in favor of this model. So anyway, we can have some more discussion about this, but wanted to give you guys a heads up that you'll see this in the preliminary budget that's given to you guys in December 30th. And it is, of course, your decision as a board as to whether that position stays in the funding or not. Next thing is more of a question, I guess, for you guys. Earlier this fall, this autumn, the board asked staff to research what could be done to create a drop-off station for compost in Enosburg Falls that could be used multiple times a week. And we're having difficulty finding a solution to this that would not put us in a position of either having to hire new staff or maybe even create a whole new department. We contacted the town of Bakersfield to see how they did their drop-off station, which they do on Saturday mornings in Bakersfield. That model is supported by volunteers in Bakersfield, but the actual pickup of the material, whatever's dropped off at their station, is done by Northwest Solid Waste Management District. So Gary Denton, if you guys don't remember, Gary is actually also a select board member for the town of Bakersfield. So he has your job, but in Bakersfield as well. So Gary, knows a little bit about that system in Bakersfield and how it operates because he's a select board member there. But Gary talked with the solid waste district, and he was told by them that the Bakersfield drop-off station was intended to be a regional drop-off center serving multiple communities, not just Bakersfield. And they did not seem very interested in setting up another location in Enosburg Falls. But they also told him that even if they did agree to do that, they would not pick up anything more than once a week. So it wouldn't get you anything more than the drop-off site in Bakersfield, which is also just once a week. So, to have a drop-off site that would be more than once a week, it's looking more and more like we would have to create this ourselves. We'd have to find the site, make sure it met any, state required designations. We would have to staff it or man it ourselves if it was going to be on village property and open during the day. Our public works department is pretty busy right now, which means, we may have to hire some additional people because you can't leave it unmanned. You have to have people there monitoring what people are dropping off for pickup because, sometimes people might leave some things that are, you just can't, no one's going to pick it up. Solid waste management is not going to dispose of it. So I guess, our question then is we feel like we're kind of stumped right now. And so we would like to know from you as a board, how big a priority for you is this? Do you want us to continue working on this with the intent of creating a new service, a new department with some kind of, physical location in Enosburg Falls? Or do you feel like we've, sort of run the end of the line of this and it's going to be more than what you thought it was going to be? Or, what are your thoughts on this right now?
That sounds a lot more involved than I thought it would be. I thought it'd be just like a metal dumpster, like just a spot. Not have to.
Yeah, you can't. You couldn't
all
just
that
put a
stuff.
dumpster up and let people use it. I mean, you could do that, but people might put things in there that solid waste isn't going to take, and then we're going to be stuck with finding a place that will accept it.
Sounds like driving to Bakersfield's sounding pretty good right now.
And there are private services too, but again, they'll only do once a week as well. But for home collection, there are a couple of outfits, Sylvester's, Casella's, that are doing home compost pickup. But
Does Casella's do home compost? Last I checked, they did not.
Oh, okay. I was told
They may have updated that and just haven't told us, but.
Okay, I was told they did. I don't use them. I use Sylvester's myself. And I know they definitely do compost because
they have pretty blue buckets.
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah.
But that's once a week too. But they'll come and they'll pick up in front of your house along with your garbage, your compost, and spray out your bucket for you. And so that is an option too, but it's not more than once a week. It's just once a week.
Does anybody know what the school does with all their compost?
They have, it's part of their service with trash removal. it gets picked up as well. Probably depends on the school and the time of year, how many days a week it's picked up. I think like the multiple times a week request is partially like if you're bringing it yourself somewhere, it's hard to necessarily like carve out Saturday mornings. You know, you might be working or whatever, and Saturday mornings just might not be available to you. But for pickup, that's a little bit easier to just put it out with the trash. I'm gonna look into see if Casella's does that. So that would be
Yeah.
nice.
I was told they did, but if you know otherwise, Heather, you could be right, because I never really looked into it. I was just told by some people around town who have Casellas that they'll provide the compost service too. But I do know that Sylvester's will do it, because I use them and they've been doing it for me for, you know, several months now since this new law took effect in Vermont. And yes, and they have the pretty blue buckets, and you know, so far for me, it's worked.
They didn't give me any buckets. I use my own.
Oh,
I
really?
think you have to ask. You have to
Yeah,
ask
if you
for
if you
them.
ask them, Jason, they'll give you one. Because I asked them, I said, will you provide the bucket? And they said yes.
I wonder if it would be worth reaching out to the school to see if they would be willing to accept compost, because they should have someone there.
I would imagine they wouldn't. The compost is back where their trash is. It's next to the food programs door. And then plus they have to pay the bill for it as well, because we have to pay the after school program has to pay the bill over the summer to use the compost.
Don't taxpayers already pay that?
Well, I mean, but it's different taxpayers because like Enosburg and Richford and Cold Hollow, those are all one school district now. So that would be then asking Richford taxpayers to, you know, help with the compost. I think it would, I mean, we could ask, but I think it would be pretty a complicated answer.
Okay, so what do we want to do? Do we want to put this on the back burner for now, or?
I think people have been figuring it out on their own since August 1st when it became law. So maybe not worry about it so much.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's not an easy solution, it sounds like, so.
Okay. All right. So we'll put this on the back burner, you know, until you guys tell us otherwise, then that you want us to start working on it again. But we did not find any easy solutions to this. So.
Yeah, thank you for looking
Thanks
into
for
that.
checking.
Yep,
Yeah.
no problem. Okay, great. I'll let Gary know. And then lastly, I just wanted to give you guys an update on the Vital Village scoping study. Last Thursday night, the community took another step forward in completing our Vital Village scoping study. We held a local concerns public meeting, electronically, of course, where the program's objectives and goals and conceptual designs and other related issues were discussed. The steering committee for the Vital Village scoping study, Du Bois and King Engineering, got a lot of good feedback, I think, from the public that did show up to the meeting. We also had several Board of Trustee members there as well. We did end up getting a majority of the board to the meeting, so it was good that we warned it as a public meeting. There were a total of 13 attendees, including the village staff, Du Bois and King, the Board of Trustee members that were there, and the general public. And I thought it went pretty well. The meeting itself lasted for about an hour. We did have one little technical glitch where some people, not everyone, but some people got dropped from the meeting for about 10 minutes or so. But we were then, I was one of those people, but we were, after about 10 minutes, they figured out what the technical problem was and we were able to get logged back in again. So I think it did go very well, and the next public meeting for this project is scheduled to be in February. We haven't nailed down the exact date yet, but we're looking at February as the next public meeting for this project, and we'll get word out to everybody once that's been set. So, and that's it for manager's report.
Okay, thank you, John. We'll move on to other business. Does anybody have any other business tonight? I have one thing. So I've been I've been contacted by a couple members of local law enforcement, and they were asking about if the village could make a paperless copy, like an electronic copy of our ordinance, and post it online somewhere and send it to specifically Franklin County Sheriff's Office, who we contract to patrol here, and also create a schedule of fines and waivers to accompany those village ordinances, because I guess they're having a hard time enforcing our local ordinances or local laws, mainly traffic related stuff. So I guess that's one tool that they would need going forward. Yeah, Matt.
So those ordinances are posted on our website. It includes a schedule of fines. And I know that in the past, the Sheriff's Department has been updated with certain ordinances, but I'm sure we can redistribute those to them.
Yeah, he actually has all this stuff. We've sent this stuff multiple times to the sheriff's department. I don't know why he's saying he doesn't have this stuff.
Okay.
We'll do it again though.
I'll get back to them, I guess, and say, you know, it's
Well,
on.
we'll do it again. You don't need to.
Yeah, if you want to tell us who to direct it to, I'd be happy to email those.
We'll send it to Roger Langevin. He's the sheriff.
And he can forward it out to the deputies.
Yeah.
But okay, that's the only thing that I have. That was an easy one.
I have a budget request. I think it's kind of financially minor. So I've been doing a lot of work through the supervisory union and the after school program for diversity, equity, inclusion training. I've been wondering about branching that training into our municipality and our community as well, in a way of trying to be kind of on like the same page on some language and understanding of some diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, so that if our community ends up with a situation that's been in the paper from other communities in Vermont and other places, that we have a basis of really being able to understand and have the language to support those situations. I've done a little bit of research. There are a few firms that offer some training that both like with like the board and the staff, and then can branch it out into the community to open up conversations. So my budget request would be to put in between $2,000 and $5,000 into the budget to be able to contract with a firm to offer something like that. Our supervisory union is currently undergoing that sort of training. It's generally just a couple of workshops of, again, understanding the landscape of a lot of issues that we're currently facing right now.
So what exactly is this training?
So it's training that talks about like, so they call it diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it talks about like human rights and you know, gender situations and being inclusive with members of our society. Gosh, I didn't prep myself before this. My apologies for being late today as well. It's been a bit of a day. So, you know, like it can help ground people in like understanding like the Black Lives Matter movement, or like gender biases or any implicit or explicit biases that we all experience. So it just helps to give some language and then a foundation for being able to understand that.
So is this training that you would do, Heather, or are you asking for the village staff to take this training, or I'm
I
just
think
trying
she's
to,
just asking for money to be put into the budget for maybe yearly trainings on things that may come up. But the diversity one would be
Right, so
awesome
it would,
for all of us to do that, but.
okay,
right, so
so
it's like
who
a
would,
1 to 5 time workshop. I'm sorry, so it wouldn't, we would, the village would hire a firm that does this professionally, like teaches 1 to 5 time workshops. There's a couple of firms in Vermont, goodness, trying to remember the names of them. I've worked with them before for writing grants for the SU to be able to provide them to teachers and staff. So, but like the way it works is the staff and the board would be part of an orientation or mini training, and then it would open the foundation of conversation for the community so that community members could attend as well. So it'd be a little bit of extra time on our parts, couple of hours total for the year, to be part of the workshops. And I've been to a couple of them, and they're pretty phenomenal. There's just so much that not like some of us just like aren't necessarily aware of, and it's really helpful for just working with individuals. Yes, CQ Strategies is one organization. So if the board is if the rest of you are interested in that, I can make sure that Matt has information and we can get more together, put together for like an official proposal.
yeah, well, because of the time, if this is something the board wants to see, we kind of need to know now, because your draft budgets are due on the 30th.
Right. Yeah, and it's been a
So-
little slow going getting a hold of some people right now because they're in really high demand. Yeah, but minimum of 2,000, maximum of 5,000 would cover a year-long workshop.
Must be a good workshop for $5,000.
Well, it would depend, like when I've worked with CQ Strategies to develop a program for the supervisory union, you know, there was like they surveyed the individuals who would be part of the workshops, and then they would personalize the workshop based on the foundation of the individuals who'd participate. So that part with CQ Strategies is pretty neat. Not all the organizations necessarily do that. Some of them have pre-designed workshops that they just kind of go through, like maybe 5 different points with opportunity for conversation and personalization within the workshop. And the workshops are roughly 2 hours long, maybe an hour and a half.
Guessing it also depends on the number of people that you want to participate in the workshop and how many of them you're going to hold.
Absolutely. So I think 2,000 like definitely would get us probably what we want, but 5,000 could, depending again on you know, what their new rates are for the new year, and how many times we would want to maybe do an internal training and then an external workshop offering for the community as well. Because I just like, and this is coming from, besides the fact that I'm doing the trainings myself and I find it very beneficial, just some of the things that I've seen in the papers of just like there's situation that arises and there's just stuff that people aren't necessarily aware of and how to address some of those situations.
Wonder if we can put it in there and then get more information on, like, put it in the draft finance for the year and We can take it out later if we decide to. I don't know.
Yeah,
Well,
Matt.
yeah, you can definitely, I'm sorry, go ahead, Matt.
You go first, John.
Well, I was just going to say, you can definitely take it out later. I mean, what you're going to get on the 30th is just a preliminary budget. It's your first cut at what the budget, your staff has been working on putting this budget together since about mid-October. And we're getting pretty close. I think we're at a good point for where we are right now, and we'll have a preliminary budget for you on the 30th, but that's still just a draft. It's not final until you guys approve the final budget, which will hopefully be around the end of January. And anything can be moved around or eliminated between now and that time period until you approve a final budget. So if you guys wanted to just see what that looked like in the budget, for now, we could put $2,000 in. If Heather's saying $2,000, she thinks would at least get kind of a basic package in there, for the training. But, we would need that guidance from you guys as a board, whether you want to see that in there or not. If not, we won't put it in. If you say yes, we'll put $2,000 or $5,000, whatever you say, and, just have that in there in your preliminary budget. And then we can talk about it as we go through the budget process to see if, you want to keep it in there or not.
Matt?
Yeah, as John said, I think it's relatively easy if the board wanted to give us some direction on a placeholder. Certainly simple to place that in there under a training line item, and then that gives Heather some time to pull together a little bit more detail about what the program might look like. And if the board then decides to leave that in based on the value of the program, you can do that. Or if you decide you want to adjust the dollar amount or even eliminate it completely, it's easy to do that later in a revision stage.
Isn't there a training section in the budget? All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Just be included under that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and just like one other little plug for it is just, a lot of the work that I do after school and my other extracurriculars besides this is just like, breaking down the silos and making connections between one organization and another. So one of the biggest organizations in our area is doing this work, and one of the struggles is often so much work happens within the school, but then it's not necessarily mirrored in the community much. So this would kind of put us sort of on level with some of the stuff that's going on within our school organizations as well, and what and kind of balance the field, so to speak. I tried to get the same presenter. She unfortunately is incredibly booked to maintain that continuity, but there are other firms that could support the idea, the concept.
Okay, so you're going to get some more information and then come back?
Yep, I can do that.
Okay.
Would the board like me to just include a $2,000 placeholder with a draft that I present to John?
Yeah.
At least then you can see the fiscal impact and you can determine whether or not you want to retain it.
That sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll put a $2,000 placeholder in. You'll see that in your preliminary budget. And Heather, between now and then, if you can find some backup that we can include in the budget materials, just supporting the cost amount that we're putting in there, maybe a little description if you can find one from one of these firms that provide this training. And that can at least start a conversation with the board once we get into, the budgeting meetings as to whether that's going to stay in the budget or whether the board doesn't feel strongly about it.
Okay.
But we'll include it in the preliminary budget, at least to start with.
Sounds
Okay.
good. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Does anybody else have any other business?
No, sir.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I
Make
make
the
the
motion.
motion.
Here. Do I, okay, Jason, you got it first.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that, Sam.
Jason with the first. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
In favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. All right.
Yep. Sam, who'd you get for the second on that?
Whoever I saw first, I think it was Leonard.
I think it was Leonard.
All right, so I have a first from Jason, a second from Leonard.
Yep. Okay. All right. Have a good.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
All right. Have a good night,
Take care.
everyone.
Aye.
Good night.